Welcome back, Hunters. It's time for another round of my essential mix sets for Monster Hunter Rise. Now, I do feel like I need to point out a few things that have been brought up. See, I've never really claimed these to be quote-unquote meta sets. These are 3 of my essential sets that I like to run. And while I do run meta sets and understand why the meta exists, why would you want to see yet another video showcasing the meta when there are a ton of creators out there doing just that? See, what I strive for is creating fun off-meta sets that still give you admirable clear times, along with showcasing some interesting gameplay that you might not think of. Sure, it may veer from the norm, but that's kind of my brand here. So, with the power of the gimmick at hand, I present to you my 3 essential dual blade sets. Sets that lean heavily into a gameplay gimmick, hopefully making for a fun experience for you hunters. For this first set, we're going to take a weapon that was doing some serious work during the early days of Monster Hunter Rise, featuring the Raging Claws, a feline-themed pair of dual blades that look less like weapons and more like part of a fursuit cosplay. Allow me to introduce you to the Felyne Fury, a set built around high crit, high damaged, and prolonged sharpness. The weapon we're going to be using is, of course, the Raging Claws with the Rampage skill Hellfire mode. I'll explain when we get further in, but this Rampage skill is required for this set. As for the armor and talisman, we're going to slot in the Deathstench Brain S, Vike Mail S, Rathalos Braces S, and the Anjanath Coil S and Grease S, with a talisman that has Protective Polish 2 and a level 2 deco slot. For the decorations, we're going to put Handicraft on the weapon, Attack in the head, 2 critical decos and a grinder deco on the chest, 2 attack decos in both the arms and waist, 2 grinder decos on the waist, a sprinto deco on the legs, and finally a critical deco in the talisman. This is going to give us the following skills: attack boost 7, 3 points in critical boost, speed sharpening, protective polish, and marathon runner, with 1 point in handicraft. It's simple and not a lot of skills, but wait until you get this in your hands. The key part of this set is Hellfire mode on the weapon. The Raging Claws features this interesting Rampage skill and no other dual blades have it. Hellfire mode turns every single attack in Demon mode into a critical hit. I repeat, every single attack in Demon mode will be a critical hit. The caveat is that your sharpness will degrade twice as fast in Demon mode than it would otherwise. So for example, with that single point in Handicraft, this weapon gets exactly 10 attacks in white sharpness before bumping down to blue. This is dropped to 5 when you're in Demon mode. Now this is where the skills Protective Polish and Speed Sharpening come in. Speed Sharpening will sharpen your weapon in 1 cycle, while Protective Polish gives you 90 seconds of fun, allowing this very slim bar of white sharpness to go the distance by preventing your weapon from losing sharpness during the entirety of the mode. This means that you can go full on Demon mode and unleash a flurry of devastatingly fast attacks on a monster, all the while preventing yourself from losing sharpness. At the end of the 90-second duration, you can sharpen again and start another 90 seconds of fury. It's a simple set with a killer gameplay mechanic, and one that's fairly easy to manage. The Raging Claws already have a decent amount of raw damage, but we're going to boost that with Attack Boost 7, further pushing it to its limit. As an aside, the paralysis effect of the weapon further gives you some utility by allowing you to sometimes paralyze the monster. It's a very small amount of paralysis damage, but it's just like a cherry on top of the sundae for this one. If you were a fan of Monster Hunter Generations and Generations Ultimate, in my opinion, this set is the closest we're ever going to get to having Prowler mode in Monster Hunter Rise. On to our next set. This explosive dual blade build leans into the power of Hellfire and Bubbles, making for an explosive set with some strong counterplay mechanics. The Hellfire Waltz mixes the unique nature of Hellfire Cloak with the defensive power of Bubbly Dance. The weapon we're going to be running on this one is the Sinister Farmin Blades from the Magnamalo tree. Once again, the Rampage skill here will be required. We're going to use Magnamalo's Soul to help make up for some of the damage disparities the set can face. For the gear, we're going to be using the Mizutsune Helm S on the head. The Valstrax Mail and braces are going to be the chest and arms. Anjanath Coil S, I guess you can see a pattern here where a lot of my sets have this waist piece. It's hands down one of my favorite waist pieces and should be a key point in anyone's build, but I digress. The Golden Hakama is going to be on the legs, with a talisman that features 2 points of Hellfire Cloak and 2 points of Counter-Strike. And there's also going to be a level 2 slot on it. Now, while Counter-Strike is nice, it isn't totally required for this set, but since I had it, I figured, why not, huh? For the decorations, we're going to be putting 2 bubble decos and 2 grinder decos in the weapon and the head. A Hellfire and a grinder deco is going to go in the chest. The arms has a bubble deco with 3 steadfast decos in the waist and legs. A counter deco is going into the waist with a brace on the legs and a tenderizer on the talisman. This will grant us the following skills: 3 points in Bubbly Dance, Weakness Exploit, Hellfire Cloak, Speed Sharpening, Resuscitate, Sunres, and Counter Strike. 2 points in Dragonheart, Attack Boost and Critical Boost, with 1 point in Flinch Free and Latent Power. The Hellfire Waltz set leans heavily into Hellfire Cloak and Bubbly Dance. Hellfire Cloak will cover your hunter in Hellfire, its Magnamalo's unique blight, whenever a monster is enraged. This is also why we require the Magnamalo's Soul Rampage skill, since it boosts your damage when afflicted by the blight. Now, while this is a 4-point skill, all you honestly really need is 3 points, with the full 4 being kind of overkill for it. Bubbly Dance 3 allows you to have increased evasion when afflicted by Bubble Blight, and this is achieved by dodging 3 consecutive times to activate the blight. While normally these blights can be a pain to deal with, we're going to harness the power of these 2 skills to make them act more like a buff. Now these go hand in hand with Resuscitate, an absolute banger of a skill that'll boost your attack power by 20 when you're suffering from an abnormal status ailment. And since these blights are going to act more like a boon here, this is where we're going to get the majority of our attack power. One thing that isn't truly explained in the game, and I know that Monster Hunter has a habit of doing this, is how Hellfire works. When you first fight Magnamalo, the game tells you to extinguish it by using your Wirebug's mobility. What it doesn't tell you is that you can use the Hellfire plume to your advantage. When you use a Wirebug's mobility move, this leaves a plume of Hellfire on the battlefield that damages the monster that comes in contact with it. Where this skill can be its most powerful is in its ability to knock a monster on its ass. The very first time a monster comes in contact with a plume of Hellfire, it's immediately downed, giving the hunter a substantial window of opportunity to attack. While monsters do build up a resistance to it, frequently using Hellfire to damage a monster will eventually get another knockdown. Now this is where the dual blade silkbind maneuvers come into play, primarily the Shrouded Vault. While normally wire dashing while your weapon is sheathed is one way to drop a plume of Hellfire, what isn't explained is that silkbind maneuvers that have mobility of their own also drop Hellfire on the battlefield. This means that if you're afflicted with Hellfire and a monster charges at you, using Shrouded Vault to counter the monster will also force it to run into Hellfire. This is one of the most reliable ways to build up some more knockdown threshold after you first drop a monster. As I mentioned, I slotted in Counter-Strike because this was included with my talisman. It's a pretty sweet tally if you ask me, and maxing out the skill gives you plus 25 attack after recovering from being knocked back. The buff from Counter-Strike, on top of the buff from Resuscitate, give us an extra 45 points of damage as long as conditions are right. Our final set for this episode once again will use the Silkbind Boost Rampage skill. For this we're going to once again use a Tigrex weapon, and like we did in the longsword video, you're going to have to activate the Silkbind Boost skill on a previous tree, the Ore tree, before we upgrade into Tigrex. The Silky Duelist uses the Silkbind Boost damage skill wonderfully, and for this one I'm going to require using the switch skill Piercing Bind. For this build, we're going to use the Tigrex Claws for the weapon. The armor we're going to be using is going to look practically identical to the Longsword Silkbound Samurai set, with the Kaiser Crown, Nargacuga Mail S, Valstrax Braces, Anjanath Coil S, Ingot Greaves S, and a talisman that features Wirebug Whisperer 3, Carving Pro 1, and a level 2 slot. For decorations, we're going to be putting a brace in the weapon, 3 grinder decos in the head and chest, tenderizer on the arm, 2 critical decos in the waist and talisman, and 3 steadfast decos on the waist and legs. This gives us critical eye 7, attack boost 4, with 3 points in weakness exploit, speed sharpening, critical boost, stun res, and Wirebug Whisperer, and 1 point in Dragonheart, evade window, flinch free, and carving pro. Much like my other silkbind boost sets, this one is built around punishing a monster with silkbind attacks. As a refresher, the silkbind boost ramps up the damage of your silkbind attacks, and this is why I require piercing bind for this one. Piercing bind plunges a kunai into the monster, and as you continue attacking, the monster gets damage in the place that you stabbed. On top of that, as you continually attack it, the damage builds up into an explosion. So, the more you attack, the bigger the damage. This attack is going to be the bread and butter of this weapon's damage. And this is why we use Wirebug Whisperer for this set. This will increase the rate that your Wirebug regenerates while you're on the ground, and since Piercing Bind has a slow recovery speed, it makes it incredibly spammable. As an added bonus, Silkbind Boost will also boost the damage of your counter attack from a Shrouded Vault. Now these sets that use Silkbind Boost are generally probably my closest to a meta set in any of my videos, while still offering a fun and engaging gimmick to play around with. So with that, we have 5 episodes down. I had a blast putting these sets together. Dual Blades are one of my favorite weapons, and one that I feel has been given such an improvement in Gen 5 Monhun. I hope that these sets will find their way into your arsenal, and with Sunbreak still a few months away, we can get a bunch more hunting done before the expansion. As always, you can find me on Twitch, where I'm usually playing Monster Hunter or whatever else interests me at that time, but it's most likely going to be Monster Hunter. And please like and subscribe if you found this to be useful. And as always, comment below. Let's chat. I love talking Monhun and appreciate your comments. And until next time, folks, you stay frosty, demons, and get lifted. I'll catch you on the next one.